He's never going to chase you, not the way you want him to, not until you stop doing the one thing that's pushing him further away every single day, and you're probably doing it right now without even knowing it. There is one specific shift, one exact change in behavior that makes an avoidant partner feel more pulled toward you than 100 thoughtful gestures ever could. It isn't about being colder, it isn't about playing games, it's something almost invisible, and once you do it, you'll watch him start showing up in ways he never did before. Let's talk about what's actually happening. An avoidant partner isn't cold because he doesn't care. That's the first thing you need to unlearn. He's cold, distant, and unpredictable because closeness itself feels like danger to his nervous system. Not danger in the way a spider or a car crash feels dangerous. Danger in the way that being truly seen, truly needed, truly depended on feels dangerous. Somewhere early in his life, closeness got tangled up with loss of self. Maybe a parent who was intrusive. Maybe a parent who was emotionally absent and taught him that needing anyone was a losing strategy. Maybe both, at different times, in ways that confused him more than either extreme alone. So he grew into an adult who wants connection and fears it in the same breath. He'll lean in when things are light, casual, low stakes. The moment it starts to feel real, the moment you start to matter, something in him quietly panics. He doesn't announce this panic. He doesn't say, "I'm scared right now." He just goes quiet. He gets busy. He becomes a little more distant, a little more logical, a little more unreachable. And this is where most women make the mistake that keeps them stuck in this cycle for years. The mistake is chasing. I don't mean chasing in some obvious, embarrassing way. I mean the subtle version. Texting one more time to check in, asking if everything is okay again, bringing up the distance, trying to talk it through, trying to get reassurance. Every one of these instincts feels loving. It feels like you're fighting for the relationship. But to an avoidant nervous system, every one of these moves reads as pressure. And pressure is the exact thing that confirms his deepest fear, which is that closeness equals losing his autonomy. So here's what happens. You feel the distance. Your anxiety spikes. You reach out to close the gap. He feels the reach as pressure. He creates more distance to protect his sense of self. You feel that distance even more sharply now. You reach out again, maybe a little more intensely this time. He pulls back even further. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't bad luck. This is a predictable, repeatable cycle that plays out almost identically in every relationship with an avoidant partner because it's driven by two nervous systems responding to each other in the worst possible way. Now here's the part that changes everything. The one thing you can do starting tonight that will make an avoidant partner feel more pulled toward you than almost anything else is this. Stop initiating the repair. Let me explain exactly what that means because it's easy to misunderstand. When an avoidant partner pulls away, your job isn't to close the gap. Your job is to let the gap exist without punishing him for it and without chasing him out of it. This doesn't mean ignoring him. It doesn't mean playing cold or pretending you don't care. It means you stop being the one who always reaches first. You stop being the one who always texts back within 2 minutes. You stop being the one who brings up the relationship every time something feels off. You let him come back to you on his own timeline without any signal from you that you're anxiously waiting. This works because of something almost every woman in this situation doesn't expect. Avoidant attachment isn't actually about wanting less connection. It's about needing to feel like connection is his choice, not an obligation placed on him. The moment you stop initiating, stop chasing, stop reaching for reassurance, something shifts in him, the pressure disappears, and when the pressure disappears, so does the thing he was running from. This is when his own attachment system starts doing something interesting. He starts to miss you. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. He starts noticing your absence in small moments. The habitual good morning text is missing, and it feels strange. The little updates about your day stop coming, and there's a gap where there used to be. And because you're no longer pursuing, his nervous system stops treating you like a threat to his autonomy and starts treating you like something he might actually lose. This is the exact mechanism behind why avoidant partners so often come back stronger after a period of space, and why the women who give that space without becoming cold, without becoming petty, without turning it into a manipulation tactic, are the ones who see the real shift. Because here's the thing, this isn't about tricking him into liking you more. This is about removing the pressure that was keeping his real feelings buried under self-protection. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like day to day, because I don't want this to stay abstract. Imagine he goes quiet for 2 days. The old pattern would be to text him something like, "Hey, is everything okay? We haven't talked in a while." That message, even though it comes from a loving place, lands as a demand for reassurance. It says, "I noticed your absence, and I need you to fix how I feel about it." Instead, the new pattern is simple. You don't send that message. You go about your life. You see friends. You work on things that matter to you. You don't perform being fine for his benefit. And you also don't perform being hurt for his benefit. You just live. When he does eventually reach out, and he will, because avoidants almost always circle back once the pressure is gone, your response matters just as much as your silence did. You don't flood him with everything you were holding back. You don't say, "I was starting to think you didn't care," or "I've been waiting for you to reach out." You respond warmly, briefly, like someone who has a full life and is glad to hear from him, not someone who's been sitting by the phone. This is not a performance. This is the natural result of actually building a life that doesn't orbit entirely around his behavior. This is the part that trips people up the most. So let me be very clear. This isn't about withholding love as a strategy. It isn't about being distant on purpose to manipulate him into chasing you. If your silence is secretly loaded with anger, with resentment, with the hope that he'll suffer a little, he will feel that even through text, even through silence. Avoidants are often highly attuned to emotional undertones because they spent years scanning for danger in relationships. What you're actually doing is something much more honest. You're simply refusing to abandon yourself in the pursuit of his reassurance. You're choosing to regulate your own anxiety instead of outsourcing that job to him through constant contact. This single shift does something that chasing never could. It removes the role he's unconsciously cast you in, which is the person who needs something from him that he can't give without feeling trapped, and it replaces it with something far more attractive to an avoidant nervous system, which is a person who is stable, self-contained, and not defined by his moods. I want you to think about this for a second. Every relationship you've ever seen an avoidant person actually commit to, actually soften in, actually show up consistently for, almost always involves a partner who didn't chase. Not because that partner didn't care, but because that partner had enough of their own life, their own identity, their own sense of worth, that they weren't waiting by the door every time he pulled away. This doesn't mean you become passive or that you accept crumbs. This isn't about lowering your standards or pretending distance doesn't hurt. It absolutely can hurt. But there's a difference between feeling that hurt and immediately trying to fix it by chasing him down. The women who see real change in avoidant partners are the ones who feel the hurt, sit with it, and choose not to let it drive their next move. There's a reason this works, and it's rooted in basic attachment theory. Anxious behavior and avoidant behavior feed each other in a loop. The more anxious energy you bring, the more avoidant behavior it triggers. But when you shift out of that anxious pursuit, even partially, even imperfectly, you break the loop. And avoidant partners, contrary to what most people believe, actually crave stability. They just can't tolerate stability that comes wrapped in pressure. The moment you offer stability without pressure, without demands, without constant check-ins, you become one of the only safe places they've ever experienced closeness without losing themselves. I want to give you something practical you can start doing today, right now, before you even finish reading this. The next time he pulls away, resist the urge to send the first message, just once. Notice how uncomfortable that feels. Notice the urge to check your phone, to reread old messages, to wonder what you did wrong. That discomfort isn't a sign that something is broken. It's a sign that you're breaking a pattern that's been running on autopilot for a long time. Sit with it, let it pass. Fill that space with something that has nothing to do with him. A walk, a conversation with a friend, work you actually care about. This isn't a trick to make him want you more, even though it often does. It's a way of proving to yourself that your peace doesn't depend on his response time. Over time, this becomes less about him and more about you. And that shift, more than any specific text or any clever line, is what actually makes avoidant partners lean in. Because what they're truly drawn to underneath all the pulling away and all the mixed signals is someone who doesn't need them to complete her, someone who wants them genuinely but isn't undone by their distance. That's rare. And avoidant partners, even if they can't put it into words, know exactly how rare it is when they find it. Let me give you a few real patterns I hear about constantly because I think seeing them laid out will help you recognize your own situation more clearly. The first pattern is what I call the disappearing act. Everything is going well. Conversations are easy. He's affectionate, maybe even talking about the future in small ways. And then, almost overnight, he goes quiet. No fight happened, no obvious trigger. He just retreats. This usually isn't about you doing something wrong. It's usually a sign that things started to feel real. And real, to an avoidant nervous system, feels like a threat. The temptation here is to ask him directly what changed. Resist that. Asking puts him on the spot to explain a feeling he probably can't articulate himself. And that pressure only deepens the retreat. The second pattern is what I call the hot and cold cycle. He's intensely present for a few days, texting often, planning things, and then suddenly distant for a week, then warm again, then distant again. This cycle can go on for months, and it's exhausting because you never know which version of him you're going to get. What's actually happening here is his nervous system swinging between wanting closeness and needing to protect himself from it. The warm phases are real. The cold phases are also real. Neither one is the full truth about how he feels about you. The mistake most women make is trying to lock in the warm phase permanently by increasing contact during it, which paradoxically speeds up the next retreat because it raises the emotional stakes faster than he can handle. The third pattern is what I call the almost commitment. He says things that sound like commitment. He talks about you meeting his friends someday. He mentions trips you could take together next year, but when it comes to actual concrete steps, defining the relationship, introducing you to people who matter, being consistent day to day, he stalls. This pattern is especially painful because the words feel like promises, But avoidant partners often use future hypotheticals as a way to feel connected without the vulnerability of present commitment. It costs them nothing to imagine a trip next year. It costs them everything to text you good morning every single day without fail. If you recognized your relationship in any of these three patterns, that recognition alone is powerful. It means you're no longer confused by behavior that used to feel random. It has a shape now. And once something has a shape, you can respond to it intentionally instead of reactively. I also want to talk about the specific things avoidant partners say, because language matters here, and learning to hear what's underneath the words changes how you respond. When he says, "I need space," what he often means is, "I'm overwhelmed by how much I feel, and I don't know how to hold it without losing myself." It rarely means he doesn't care. It usually means he cares more than he's comfortable with. When he says, "I'm not good at this relationship stuff," what he often means is, "I'm scared of doing this wrong and disappointing you, so I'm getting ahead of my failure before it happens." This is a protective statement disguised as a confession. When he says, "Let's just see where this goes," what he often means is, "I want this," but naming it out loud makes it too real, too fast. This isn't indifference, it's often the opposite, filtered through a fear of being trapped by his own words. Understanding this doesn't mean you should excuse behavior that genuinely hurts you. It means you can respond with clarity instead of panic. You can hear, "I need space," and choose to give it without spiraling into stories about what it means about your worth. Now, here's something I think doesn't get said enough. This entire approach only works if you're also doing your own work underneath it. You can't fake secure behavior while internally still checking his read receipts every 10 minutes. He will feel the difference between someone who has genuinely regulated their own anxiety and someone who's just performing calm on the surface while falling apart underneath. This is why the real shift isn't a script you follow. It's a nervous system change you build slowly through practice, through tolerating discomfort without immediately reaching for relief through his attention. One way to build this is to get honest with yourself about where your anxiety is actually coming from. Sometimes it's about him, often it's older than him. It's about every time in your life someone left or withdrew or made you feel like you had to earn their presence. If that's true for you, this pattern with him is likely just the newest chapter in a much older story. Recognizing that doesn't mean the relationship isn't real. It means part of what you're healing here isn't really about him at all. I also want to address something important, because I don't want you leaving this thinking that space alone fixes everything. Space is not a magic trick. It's not a manipulation tactic that guarantees he comes running back. Sometimes an avoidant partner is simply not ready or not willing to do the internal work required to show up fully. Giving space won't create desire out of nothing. What it does is remove the interference that was drowning out whatever genuine feeling was already there. If there's real connection underneath the avoidant patterns, space allows it to surface. If there isn't, space allows you to see that clearly too, without the fog of constant anxious pursuit clouding your judgment. This is actually one of the most valuable side effects of this shift. When you stop chasing, you get clarity. You start to see the relationship as it actually is, not as the version you've been keeping alive through your own effort. Some women do this and find their avoidant partner starts showing up more, softening, initiating contact for the first time in months. Others do this and realize the relationship was being held together entirely by their own anxious energy. And that's painful, but it's also the truth. Either way, you gain something you didn't have before, which is an accurate picture of what this person is actually capable of giving you. Let's talk about what this looks like when it's working, because I know some of you are wondering how to tell the difference between him needing more time and him simply not being invested. When this shift starts working, you'll notice small changes first. He starts reaching out first, even if it's brief. He asks questions about your day instead of just responding to whatever you bring up. He starts initiating plans instead of only agreeing to plans you suggest. His texts feel less like obligations and more like he actually wants to talk to you. These are subtle signs, but they matter because avoidant partners rarely make grand gestures. Their effort shows up in small, consistent behaviors, not dramatic declarations. If none of this happens after a genuine period of space, if he takes the space and simply disappears further, that's information too. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means his capacity, at least right now, doesn't match what you need, and that's not a failure on your part. That's clarity, and clarity is always more valuable than the exhausting uncertainty of constant pursuit. There's also a practical side to this that I want to walk you through, because knowing the theory is one thing and actually living it day to day is another. Start by tracking your own urges instead of acting on them right away. When you feel the pull to text him after a period of silence, pause. Don't suppress the feeling, just delay the action. Ask yourself, is this urge coming from genuine desire to connect, or is it coming from anxiety that wants immediate relief? Often it's the second one. And urges rooted in anxiety pass on their own within a short window if you let them, usually within 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes within a few hours. Once that window passes, you get to choose your response with a clearer head instead of reacting from panic. Another practical piece is redirecting the energy you use to spend monitoring him into something that builds your own life. This is not a throwaway suggestion. It quote S central to why this approach works. Every hour you spend rereading old texts or refreshing his social media is an hour reinforcing the belief that your peace depends on his behavior. Every hour you spend instead on your own goals, your own friendships, your own growth reinforces the opposite belief, which is that your life is full and stable independent of him. Avoidant partners can sense this shift, not because they're reading your mind, but because people who've built a full life carry themselves differently. They text differently. They show up differently. There's less desperation in the energy, and desperation, even well disguised, is one of the fastest ways to trigger an avoidant partner's retreat. I also want you to give yourself permission to grieve the version of the relationship you wish you already had. A lot of women stay stuck in the anxious chasing pattern because slowing down means facing the reality that this relationship right now isn't what they hoped it would be. That's a real loss, and it deserves to be felt, not bypassed. But feeling that loss honestly is what allows you to stop performing a version of okay that you don't actually feel, which, as we talked about earlier, avoidant partners tend to sense anyway. I know this is hard to hear if you've spent months or years in this pattern believing that if you just tried a little harder, loved a little more visibly, explained your feelings a little more clearly, he would finally understand and change. But an avoidant partner doesn't need more explanation from you. He needs less pressure. And the two of those often feel like opposites, but they aren't. You can be deeply present, deeply caring, and deeply honest about your needs without turning every moment of distance into an emergency that needs immediate repair. This is the real shift behind loving an avoidant person well, if that's the path you choose. It isn't about becoming someone who doesn't care. It's about becoming someone whose care doesn't collapse into anxiety the moment he needs a little room to breathe. That distinction is everything. I want to leave you with one more thing before we close this out. This pattern, the anxious pursuit meeting avoidant withdrawal, isn't a personal flaw. It isn't proof that you're too much or too needy or too broken to be loved properly. It's a learned response built from your own history, just like his avoidance was built from his. The difference is you have the ability to notice it, name it, and change it. He may never do that work, but you can. And when you do, you stop being at the mercy of his pulling away, because your sense of safety stops depending on his consistency. Give this shift real time. Don't expect it to change everything overnight. Nervous systems, yours and his, take weeks, sometimes months, to recalibrate around a new pattern. But if you commit to this one change, if you stop being the one who always initiates the repair, you'll start to see him show up in ways that feel less like effort and more like genuine desire. That's the difference between being chosen out of pressure and being chosen out of real, unforced feeling. And that difference is worth every uncomfortable moment it takes to get there.